I don't think he loves me like he loves you." Those were the words my younger brother, Aiden, whispered to me one rainy night. We were both lying in bed, listening to the patter of raindrops against the window, and that's when he broke the silence with that heartbreaking statement. I didn't know what to say, so I just squeezed his hand and told him, "You're my brother, and that's all that matters." Our story wasn't a simple one. Our mom, Kate, was young when she had me. She'd just turned 20, and my dad didn't stick around for long after I was born. It was just me and her for the first few years. I remember the small apartment we lived in, the one with creaky floors and a view of a bustling street below. My mom was everything to me back then. She was my whole world. Then, one day, she met someone new, Tom. He was kind and patient, and he made her laugh in a way I hadn't seen before. Tom was tall, with a scruffy beard and eyes that crinkled when he smiled. He came into our lives slowly, easing his way in like he didn't want to scare me off. At first, he'd come over just to fix things around the apartment, leaky pipes, a broken heater, the little things my mom couldn't manage on her own. And every time he fixed something, he'd stay a little longer. Soon, he was staying for dinner, then weekends. And before I knew it, he'd moved in with us, filling the empty spaces in our lives. Tom wasn't like my dad. He was steady, dependable, and I could tell he loved my mom deeply. But he also made sure I knew he was there for me too. He'd help me with homework, take me to the park, and teach me how to throw a baseball. He even started calling me a buddy, which made me feel special. I started to feel like maybe he was the dad I'd been waiting for all along. Then Aiden came along. When mom told me she was having a baby, I was over the moon. I was only 7, but I was thrilled to be a big brother. I imagined holding him, teaching him things, and showing him all the cool stuff I knew. And when he was born, it was like my heart grew twice as big. I loved Aiden from the moment I saw him. But as Aiden grew, things started to change. Tom was over the moon for him. He would carry Aiden around like a little prince, showing him off to friends and family, always doting on him. At first, it didn't bother me. I loved seeing my little brother so happy. But after a while, I started to notice things I hadn't before. Tom would go to all of Aiden's school events, but he'd often miss mine. He'd take Aiden out for ice cream or to the movies, but I'd sometimes be left behind. It was like he'd forgotten he had 2 sons, not just one. I told myself it wasn't true, that Tom loved us both equally. But those thoughts kept creeping in, no matter how hard I tried to ignore them. One day, when I was about 11 and Aiden was 4, it finally hit me. We were all at a family gathering, and Tom introduced us to some of his old friends. He put his arm around Aiden and said, "This is my son." And then he looked at me, gave an awkward smile, and said, "And this is Kate's boy." Those words felt like a punch to the gut. Kate's boy. Not his son, not even our boy. Just Kate's. After that day, I couldn't help but notice how different things were. Aiden was too young to understand, and he adored Tom with all his heart. To Aiden, Tom was dad, the only dad he'd ever known. And Tom seemed to feel the same. I'd still get a pat on the back or a "good job, buddy" every now and then, but it wasn't the same. The hugs, the pride in his eyes, the joy, all of it seemed reserved for Aiden. Mom noticed, of course. She'd pull me aside and give me little pep talks. "Tom loves you both," she'd say, her voice full of reassurance. But even she couldn't completely hide the sadness in her eyes. I think she knew, deep down, that Tom's heart was divided in a way that wasn't fair to me. Years passed, and I tried to be the best big brother I could. I took Aiden to the park, played games with him, helped him with homework when he started school. I became his little hero in a way, someone he could look up to. But there was always that shadow between us, the shadow of a father who loved one son a little more than the other. One evening, When I was about 15 and Aiden was 8, he came into my room, looking more serious than I'd ever seen him. He sat down on my bed, his small hands fidgeting, and he looked up at me with those big, innocent eyes. "Is it true?" he asked. "Is what true?" I replied, trying to keep my voice calm. "That Tom's not your dad," he whispered. I took a deep breath and nodded. "Yeah, he's not my real dad. But he's your dad. And that's what matters." Aiden looked down, and his lip trembled. "But I want him to be your dad too. It's not fair." I pulled him close, holding him tightly. "It's okay, Aiden. I've got you, and you've got me. We are brothers, and that's all we need." Aiden started to cry, and for the first time, I felt like maybe he understood, maybe he saw the gap that had always been there. From that moment on, something changed between us. He became fiercely protective of me, always trying to include me in things with Tom, always making sure I didn't feel left out. And I loved him even more for it. Now, looking back, I can see how complicated family can be. Tom may not have been the father I'd hoped for, but he gave me Aiden. And Aiden, well, he became my whole world. Even if things weren't perfect, we had each other. And as long as we held on to that, I knew we'd be okay.